witnessed here in testimony Antonio's ceremony.
The Strayaran have suffered many of the same losses felt by the citizens of Estolia. Setting aside the extraordinary ruptures experienced during the times of Apollyon and Cavanaugh, there have been many quieter tragedies endured across the Capitulos, Caetheros and Ulysses, Antonio and Theobaldo, Maximilian and Xavier. While no less devastating than any loss felt by ordinary citizens, theirs remain uniquely poignant under the weight of the scrutiny paid to our most visible leaders. Nicodemus Luciano Zac Arian, Capitulo 89.
The ceremony held Charlotte's full attention. Reggie joined his father and his uncle Ricardorn on the dais. Ricard wore his religious robes, his black sash pristine and uncreased, clearly brand new. The braided gold, purple and green rope tied around his middle was intricately detailed, weighted by heavy gold endcaps. He stood at the forefront of the dais, waiting while the last of the audience trickled in. Camilla entered the cathedral on Generaldo's arm and took her seat in the front row. A delicate flute, oboe and panpipe medley played as Antonio entered the cathedral with Laura on his arm. Charlotte had half expected the girl who had stormed from their suite, voice cracking and fingers plucking at her gown, but instead Laura moved with the poise of someone who had never wailed.
I want him now!
At all. Antonio left her beside Charlotte and continued alone to the dais. The words they spoke were all in the language of Estolia, so Charlotte could not follow them. One did not have to know the language to feel the emotion and power of the ceremony. The king and Reggie approached Ricard. Antonio joined his father, and Reggie knelt on the large embroidered pillows. Antonio and Ricard placed their hands on his head and gave him a blessing. When they finished, Reggie rose. Ricard drew a heavy dagger from inside his sash and held it with deliberate care, speaking first to Reggie, then to Antonio. When Ricard finished speaking, Reggie stepped forward, hands held together, palms up. Ricard placed the dagger on his palms and stood still, while the king unpinned the black sash from Ricard's robes, bowing his head as he handed it back before stepping away. Then it was Antonio's turn to be the center of attention. Ricard pinned the sash over Antonio's slightly less ornate robes. When he was done, he spent several minutes fussing over the exact placement of the sash until it was perfect. Then Reggie stepped forward. He spoke to each man in turn. His father, his uncle, his cousin. His voice low and measured, their words solemn and heartfelt. When he finished, he dropped to one knee and proffered the dagger on his spread palms. Antonio gripped Reggie's shoulder briefly before taking the dagger. He held it aloft, showing it to the assembled citizens, then slid it home in the black sash. Reggie bowed to his father, his uncle, and his cousin, then left the dais and came to where Charlotte sat. He smiled down at her and took her hand to kiss it before the assembled citizens. Then he settled beside her, turning his attention back to the men on the dais. Ricard's voice rose and fell in cadences Charlotte could not follow. Then he gestured to the pillows. Antonio sank to his knees, and Ricard placed his hands on his head. The blessing was long. Charlotte understood none of the words. During the lengthy blessing, Charlotte held Reggie's hand and thought back to when he had stood on the dais. His voice low and measured, speaking to his father, his uncle, his cousin. The deliberate drop to one knee, the dagger proffered on spread palms. The love between the young cousins, between the brothers, profound, wordless, settling into memory. And she thought, too, of the dagger she had seen Antonio lift. The blade curved in a serpentine fashion, undulating like a snake from jeweled hilt to point, its surface decorated with intricate designs. The hilt adorned with jewels that caught the light as he held it aloft. Finally, Ricard finished the blessing, and Antonio climbed back to his feet. Charlotte watched him stand straighter, his shoulders set, his chin lifted. Something determined had settled in his expression. The music started up again, and Reggie escorted her out of the building. As he handed her into the carriage, she saw Antonio leaving the cathedral, a blushing Laura on his arm. Whatever doubts had troubled her friend earlier seemed quieted now. Charlotte was glad for her. The new purpose in Antonio's bearing was mirrored in Laura's ease. Together their future seemed certain. Once the carriage began the journey back to the palace, she turned to Reggie. The sun had slipped below the horizon while they were in the cathedral, but its afterglow still burned across the sky.
Was the ceremony timed to coincide with the sunset?
He grinned at her, his smile brilliant in the twilight, radiating warmth.
Yes, Charlotte, symbolism is a big part of the Estolian faith. There is something symbolic about both the dawn we shared this morning and the sunset that took place during our ceremony. You've seen our flag?
She nodded, her thoughts going to the flag that she'd seen. 2 triangles dominated, mountains according to Camilla, with 4 8-pointed stars between them and 2 on either side.
The cycle of leadership,
Reggie said,
is like the rising and setting of the sun. This morning we witnessed dawn, the beginning of the end of my father's reign. Tonight at sunset, my cousin took his first role. Each generation shifts the stars toward the crown. When Antonio marries, he becomes keeper. The full transition completes only when his first child is 7 days old. Then the cycle begins again.
How does this relate to the flag?
She asked.
The central 4 stars,
He explained.
represent the 4 most powerful men in Estolia: the king, the keeper, the heir apparent, and his last resort. The 2 stars on the right are setting, kings and keepers who have passed beyond active leadership. The 2 on the left are rising, the generation ascending to take their place. Over time, my father yields the crown to me. Antonio becomes keeper when he marries. Only when his first child is 7 days old is the transition complete. As night follows day, the cycle is reborn.
They travelled in silence. 5 minutes after the carriage left the cathedral, it began to ascend the palace road. Charlotte's restraint broke.
Did you mean it?
She blurted.
The cathedral fills with flute and pipe. Ricard stands in robes of white. The black sash new, the gold rope bright. A dagger waits for morning light. Antonio walks with Laura's grace. No trace of tears upon her